Good day there, and we are finally back on the air after a week
Yes.
off, and that was your fault.
It was my fault.
It was totally your fault.
Yes. But here we're back.
We got to stop saying we're back. just be back. Stop
That's right.
saying you're back.
Yeah.
You had a COVID scare.
Yeah.
Not really.
Not really, but we
enough.
had enough of something that happened where we were like, okay, we need to be mindful.
Be mindful.
Yeah.
And you were mindful.
Yep.
We took a week off from recording because we record indoors.
Right.
And
yeah,
got a tests. All the tests came back clear.
Came back clear. We're good
Pregnancy
to go.
tests. All the tests.
All the pregnancy tests are clear.
You're not pregnant.
No.
Okay.
The test confirmed.
The test confirmed that you, sir,
yes,
Andrew Clark,
yes,
are not pregnant.
No.
Okay.
No. We got our hands full already.
You got your hands full already, and by full you mean like full.
Like we have one kid. Like literally, our hands are full.
You got to put that
kid
on a diet now, man. Yeah, seriously, that kid's.
We're hoping the crawling kicks in.
That's a beast.
And that he starts to burn some calories.
Because he's just one large calorie absorption right now.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not doing anything.
When like we say things to him about it. We were just lovingly and jokingly, and we had a friend who was like, "You guys got to stop that immediately. This is gonna go bad." We're like, "Oh, he's only 6 months. Come on,
this won't affect him that much." It might.
Just grow up with a general sadness inside.
So I think this might be a good venue for me to mention something to people who are listening. I did get the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go back and you listen to our, what is that, the second episode of this season?
Yes.
Solo vaccine?
Yes.
You know, one of the things that I said on that show was like, once you get past the moral implications, the conscience wrestling, and all the things that kind of go along that are bigger, wider than most people consider.
Yeah.
When it comes to do I or don't I take the vaccine. Once you get through all of that, then it really comes down to just, a successive list of personal implications, that you then have to wrestle through.
Right.
And so like, California's not the best so far, and I think it's like second to last in the vaccine rollout.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, we're getting beat out by West Virginia and Florida, who are near the top of the list.
Yeah.
So take me home, country roads.
That's right. Seriously.
Anyways.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know that there was a ranking.
That sounds terrible, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But that was the vibe I was getting. That we were not doing a great job.
Well, and I think, and obviously my wife knows that that I really wrestled with that decision.
Yeah.
Like up until the minutes before I took it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason we ended up doing it is, we got, Tyler in our house, who, for those of you that don't know, he's got special needs. He's immune compromised, brain damage, epilepsy. So he's got a host of complications that make him in particularly more vulnerable. And because of the way that California is doing their rollout, they won't vaccinate him yet. He doesn't fall into the right tier. But the weird part is they'll vaccinate me,
right?
Because we, as IHSS, in-home support services, we qualify under healthcare workers.
Yeah. So
what we ended up doing is saying, all right, even if it helps 1%, it's more than no percent for Tyler.
Right.
So here's why I'm bringing this up. Like, it was the most stressful part of COVID over this last season for our family has been how much risk do we take on for ourselves and still protect Tyler for the same time. At the same time.
Right. Yeah.
And Shannon and I would land at very different places sometimes.
Sure.
And trying to figure that all out. Now, we always kind of came back to center.
Yeah.
But that was 100% the most stressful thing. And so So with the vaccine, what we decided is, listen, if they're not going to vaccine my son, then we're gonna do anything we can to protect him from those who are putting him at risk, which is basically our immediate household.
Right. Yeah.
So that's how we made the decision.
Yeah.
Now, the topic that you want to talk about kind of blends into this, which is like, man, I cannot tell you the lasting effects in my home of like being stressed out every day of making sure that Tyler doesn't get this thing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Now, I think that because we weren't really living out of this fear paradigm for ourselves all the time, I think we've mostly been able to shake a lot of that loose.
Yeah.
But like, you sent me article after article after article of like, this is becoming a real problem, generally speaking.
Right.
And people don't look like they're going to shake it loose anytime soon. And what I mean by that is like the effects of quarantining, the effects of distancing, the effects of all this stuff.
Yep.
So why did you want to talk about this?
Well, so I was looking for a headline, as we do, and I was trying to avoid talking about politics or vaccines. It's like,
what?
I know. So it's,
well, shoot, and I just talked about vaccine. All right.
No,
anyways,
it ties in. You know what I mean? And there was a title that grabbed me of a piece, and the title was "What You're Feeling Is Grief."
Yeah,
that was the title of it.
Yeah, I think I got that one. Yeah.
Wow, that's a bit presumptuous.
That's the New York
Magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I popped it open, and it kind of sent me down a rabbit trail, and it actually tied into something that I saw a pastor post a few weeks ago, which was one of the other articles I sent you, which was called "The Perils of Social Distancing." And what's really interesting about all of these is, you know, we have adopted these practices.
Oh, yeah, that was in the New York Times.
Yeah, that was the New York Times one. We've adopted these practices of social distancing and quarantining, and back in March, whenever this all first started for us here in California, I don't know where everyone else is, but
Sweden.
Sweden. Shout out to Sweden.
Shout out to Sweden.
And it was all under the guise of, and still is, protecting our health, right? And so everyone was on board and said, okay, great, we're going to do this, we're going to quarantine, we're going to flatten the curve, we're going to distance ourselves from one another. But what these articles and opinion pieces that I've found and then sent to you have revealed is that, you know, every decision has consequences.
Yeah. And these are coming out of mostly liberal writings, which is like, you know, did we trade one demon for another is what they're asking.
Yeah, totally. And it's a great question. I think what I really want to what they really focus on, I want to talk about is back in March, it was like, we can all do this, right?
Yeah, I would just remember going like, yeah, we can do this for a few weeks.
Right. And
we're so naive.
Yeah, and when you talk about your anxiety like over your son, it's like, okay, this is hard and this is scary, but we can buckle down as a family. We can, you know, we can make sacrifices and we can do what we can to protect him. And we were all kind of in it together, and we're coming up on, you know, in a month it'll be like, it's been about 11 months. It's almost been a year since we have been doing this. And the isolation and the distancing and the life not as we know it for that long, I think is having profound effects on people. And I wanted to talk about it, at least in a cursory manner between the two of us, because I think it's good to get these things out in the open and for us to actually face. Like, when I saw that headline, it made me kind of come to terms in a new way with.
Okay, so you said like you were watching TV,
right?
And explain.
Yeah,
this.
So I mean, my wife and I will be watching something on Netflix or whatever, and people will be at a party or something.
Yeah.
Or like they'll shake hands or they'll hug or they'll kiss.
Like, what are you doing?
And sometimes if I'm caught off guard, there's like this little twinge of anxiety in me, and I'm like, what? Why? Well, it's because that's how I'm viewing social settings right now, and it's just like this default precaution that's in
Yeah.
in me, and it's changing the way that I look at the social landscape.
Yeah, and you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, you can just Google this. Our brains are literally being reprogrammed in a way that people are starting to ask questions like, oh no, we might have done something that there's an unintended consequence to all of this.
Right.
You know, because our brains are being reprogrammed to avoid one another, to stay away from one another, to see people as threats.
Yeah.
And what's happening is it's running up against and conflicting against this other, for lack of a better word, programming inside of us that is going, I need people.
Yep.
I need community. I need in person. I need to shake hands. I need a hug.
Right.
So those two things are now in conflict with one another.
Yeah.
And it's in that conflict, the net result of that is depression, fear, anxiety, whatever.
There's a great quote from that New York Magazine article. Nick Francis, a filmmaker, says he didn't experience severe mental health issues before the pandemic, so mentally a healthy individual.
Yeah.
But in August 2020, when Francis was quarantining at home alone in Oakland, he lost one of his closest friends just before Christmas. His grandfather died, so 2 deaths. Neither death was caused by the coronavirus, but the inability to mourn with others in his community has hit him harder than he could have imagined. The loss and his continued isolation from others has left him feeling like some sort of golem, he says, a creature designed to continue to function, continue to write, create, to live, but each part slowly replaced with something artificial and mechanical until there is nothing left but engines and gears.
I actually highlighted that exact quote.
I'm like, dude, you are a filmmaker. That was really poetic.
It was really poetic. Well, and it's because it's like we haven't just lost, like for some people, it's not that they've just lost lives. Because I think a vast majority of people don't quite relate to that part.
Right.
They know loss of life is happening out there in an ethereal sense. Now, for some people, obviously, it's very personal, and they have lost people that they love. I don't mean to diminish that whatsoever.
No, of course not. Yeah.
But what everyone can relate to is loss in general, because, like, again, same article, you know, the loss of life is on top of the loss of jobs, homes, school days, favorite restaurants, music venues, stores that have been lost or shuttered in the economic fallout. In other words, the loss is about a way of life.
Yeah.
Not even necessarily a specific thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And dude, I feel that.
Yep.
That's the thing I think that's getting to me the most, especially as a pastor.
Yeah.
When there is such a set way of life, especially on Sundays, that has been not interrupted, but feels lost right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least to me, it feels lost.
No, 100%. Yeah, there was this heartbreaking video that was going around at the start of COVID where someone in another country, I think it was Italy, and this doctor came home from work, and his kid started running up to him to like say hi, Dad, and give him a big hug, and he had to like tell him to stop.
Yeah.
And he just like broke down, you know, because there was this like barrier in between what was normally a very like that physical touch is such. I mean, that's an extreme example, but on a Sunday morning, like all these things that we just took for granted, like this passing of social activity that was so normal is a huge loss.
Yeah, and there's now all these labels are kind of emerging: pandemic grief, health. There's now a mental health pandemic, more than there is a virus pandemic. Our resilience muscle, meaning that thing that at the beginning, like you were saying at the beginning, when we were all, I can get through this, we can do this, you know. But the longer and longer it goes on, that resilience muscle is essentially starting to now, you know, wear out.
And I think that part is worth noting, the humanity of that, because you know, I think that there are certainly people out there who are being unwise and who are just not taking things seriously in one way. But I think any socialization effort that's made often gets blasted as like how dare you? Like, don't you believe the science?
I
And
think that's wrong.
it removes the humanity of like,
Okay, so I got something that goes on, along with that, because I
Yeah.
think you're bringing up a good point. So I actually can't cite where this is coming from.
Mhm.
So this was sent to me by my wife. I'm not allowed to cite where it's from because it's private content.
Got it.
So I can't cite the author and I can't cite where this content came from.
Mhm.
Okay, but I can tell you that the lady who's writing here in this, was around and I think worked with when the AIDS epidemic first kind of came on site, particularly here in the Bay Area,
Yeah.
particularly in San Francisco.
Right.
And one of the things that she notes is like the first go-to of a society when something like this happens, because it was true back then just like it is now, is we try and get people to change behavior. And here's one of the things she writes: behavior change is virtually impossible for a society. Even with full buy-in, long-term behavior change is extremely difficult. If it was possible, we still wouldn't have racism, obesity,
Right.
alcoholism, addiction. Behavior change is not as like you should just stop doing that.
Right.
In other words, what she's saying here is like there's a different pathology that you need to consider that's going on in people's minds and hearts on any given day.
That's right.
They're weighing a risk reward every day of like, I'm now more lonely than I am afraid of COVID.
That's right.
And they cross that threshold and they're going to make a decision in self-preservation accordingly.
Right.
So it's not just a matter of, don't you take it seriously or whatever it is.
It's deeper than that.
It's so much more deeper and profound than that.
That's right. Yep. That's really worth noting. Yeah, because it's just so like I mean, I remember reading an article earlier on in all of this in the springtime about like people who were attending funerals over Zoom and things like that.
Oh my gosh!
And it's like
grieving has always historically, including sitting Shiva, has always historically been a communal thing.
Yep.
You can't properly grieve in isolation.
No.
So all these people are like in this arrested development stage of grief.
Yeah.
In perpetuity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we just had my grandmother's funeral in October of 19. So, 5-6 months before all of this, and I can't imagine having to do. We have family all over the country, and they all flew into Washington State to do that. And I mean, just the closure that brought, not for everyone, obviously, but like that is a part of saying goodbye to someone, is seeing everyone and remembering that life with people, and to do that over a shaky internet connection is a very poor substitute.
And I think what like adds to it is the inequity and disparity of it all, which like even just like if you live in California, you're like looking over the fence at places like Florida and going, hey, what are you guys doing over there? She the same person who wrote what I was just talking about wrote this: I'm in an open state. My family and I operate largely as normal. We wear masks to enter and exit buildings, but for the most part, we are operating at almost complete normalcy, except for capacity limitations on certain places like bars and restaurants. My friends who are not are filled with anxiety, depression, and fear.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's like, and so I think it's like, wherever your politics on all this lie, wherever your, conscience on all of this stuff lays, I think like the one of the things I think that we need to start calculating in our decision making is like the unintended consequence.
That's right.
The hidden virus behind the virus that could emerge.
That's right. And I think that's part of why I wanted to bring this up in the conversation of our church, but also wider, is like to pay attention to that part of you that is sad and lonely and feeling isolated, because the solution can't keep being just suck it up, we'll get through this. It's gone too far.
Yeah.
It's gone too long for that to be a healthy solution.
Even if really smart people are saying that. So like she writes this, most doctors and nurses have pretty much, they have all the training in self-preservation.
Right.
We should be listening to them in
Of
that
course.
way, okay?
Yep.
However, they have pretty much zero training in affecting long-term change, and are almost never educated on behavioral change within large populations. In other words, the point that she's trying to make here is like you can only tell someone that there's something out there to kill you long enough, for so long, before people start making decisions for themselves and being willing to take on certain amount of risks, because there are other things knocking at their door that are more pressing.
Yeah. Well, and it's, the science of it is, and I'm not a practicing scientist, but I did learn science at one point in my life. If everyone locked themselves in their house, really locked themselves in their house for, I don't know, a month, 2 months, then hypothetically it would all be done with.
Hypothetically.
So we have how a virus works, which is what the medical community is trying to get us to understand, and why we have these mitigating things like masks and distancing. And so they're trying to do their best in like, hey, this is how this works, and here's how to keep it from spreading. But then the other side of that, which I think they might acknowledge if asked in a conversation like this, is like we're not machines at the same time. And there's
you can't just power us down for a month.
That's right. You can't just lock everyone in the closet. And that's not what they're trying to do. I live with healthcare professionals, I know, but there's this side to it that we need to pay attention to that can't just be like kept getting swept under the rug, saying we're gonna get through this, and it's gonna, I actually think you recently wrote a post for our church about the upcoming sermon series that you did, and you talked a little bit about, as an introvert, how even though there were times where it was nice to be in this situation that we're in, that even you and I, as a fellow introvert, I resonated with every line of what you wrote. But talk a little bit about, just in brief summary, like what you wrote and those feelings that you were having in terms of.
So which part are you referring to?
I'm referring to,
part
like,
of me is looking at my notes, so I'm just like confessing that I'm like staring at my notes and listening to you half the time.
No, that's okay. No problem.
So I know the article. Obviously,
I guess like the tension. There were parts of quarantine that you enjoyed, but then that began to fade over time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I was saying is, like, I wouldn't have said this on a microphone at the time,
right?
But like, there was a part of me that was like, well, this is what I've trained my whole life for.
Yeah,
I don't have to do any counseling. I don't have to meet with people. I don't have any obligation to go make home visits. So there are all these things that, come very natural to me, which is to turn in on myself. Right. And, I've had 20 plus years of the Christian life, which has tried to get me to die to my natural tendency. And to this, social anxiety that I experience. It's weird. People are like, well, you're a public communicator. Well, that has nothing to do with anything. Public communication is not interacting with the public, really.
No.
It's interacting with the content of my text in a public setting, but I'm not interacting with the public, which is where my anxiety kicks in. So like sitting at a Christmas party, I'm at that's a hard venue for me. Or whatever. And so but then, you can only smoke so many cigars on your deck, and then you're like, oh man, there's like a sharp pain in my chest. Is it the cigars? What have I done?
Yeah, right.
And you're like, you know, you remember the Grinch where they zoom in on his heart,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I know what this strange feeling is.
Right.
I feel lonely.
Yeah. Yep.
I miss people.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, so all of a sudden, I'm like, if I feel this way,
Yeah.
the self-proclaimed emperor of introverts,
Right.
how must other people feel?
Yeah.
Like the Candy Beamans of the world?
Yeah. Right.
And
Totally.
you know, your wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It actually made me feel, because I resonate that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I had a very similar reaction when things first,
Yeah.
shut down, but I don't know when it happened. And a lot of this was skewed. My experience was skewed because we were expecting a kid, and so it was really not the same as everyone's quarantine. But I remember at some point feeling that the weight of that really, like, I just miss like going to a restaurant with people that I love, you know, like friends from church after Sunday. Like I would pay double, triple to like go do that right now, you know. And it made me sad that I had not considered that sooner.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't know if there was a way to prevent that.
One of the articles you sent me was about Marissa King, who I guess wrote something called the social chemistry.
Yeah.
And here's a quote: "Spending a couple minutes casually interacting with a stranger or barista can actually make us as happy as spending the same amount of time with our romantic other or partner." And the power of touch. While we often think of hugs as a way of catching colds right now, they're actually also surprisingly good at preventing them, because I think she's talking about the effects on the brain and then the immune system and then all of that.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's this like fight in us right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's making a lot of people sad.
Yeah, it's like, where do I put that energy, that type of
And I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I think that maybe the way that I shifted was like, I have to now, I'm going to start evaluating risk in these concentric circles. You know how much I love concentric circles.
You love them.
I love them so much.
Yes.
But it was really helpful for me to go, okay, there is this thing out there. People catch it. Some people die. Those are the facts. They are indisputable. Okay. It's a virus. Some people catch it. Some people die.
Right.
Okay. So then as I moved out from that bullseye, which was like, okay, it's less in Marin. It's less if you do this. It's less if you then, in other words, where you're just the further you moved on that concentric circle out, that I could basically get risk down to a place where I was comfortable enough to then live a little bit more life.
Yeah.
In my own conscience, because then it was like, I've got X% chance of catching COVID today, but I've got 100% chance of being very sad today.
Yeah. And that's it. I like when you walk through the concentric circles, which you've done in other contexts, but because it gives people a way to think through it in a critical way, instead of it just being like kind of this flippant. Well, it's okay over here, but not okay over here, and it helps give people a little bit of a thinking framework for how to consider.
So when we went through the spikes here in California, that brought my concentric circles down a notch, right? Because now the odds went up, right? And then, but they didn't bring it far in as if I was living in LA.
Yes. Yeah.
Where everybody's on top of each other.
Right.
And it didn't bring it as far in as if I was somebody in LA who was working with the public. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%.
Like, so in other words, like we shouldn't all be adjusting to the same circle at the same time in the same ways.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah. No, it's the important thing is that people are thinking critically about it, I think. And keeping in mind this need that we have as humans or created beings, that people are important and people are, we need to help us cope with this loss that, as you said, isn't just life, but is events and
it's a way of
the
life.
way of life. Yeah. To help us cope with that, even if it can't be the way it was, we need something, and we need. So I thought it was really interesting in that first article about grief. The author wrote, "I wake up every day and ask myself this question: how long?"
Mm.
I was like, well, that's an interesting phrase. And it's interesting for a few reasons. She goes on to say that, she's talking about her self-care activities and like how those help sometimes, but then some days they don't.
Yeah.
Surviving the pandemic has started to feel like a Sisyphean feat, which is the Greek guy who was sentenced to roll a boulder up a hill, and then it would just roll back down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hopeless and painful. I miss my friends so much it hurts, and I cry more than I used to.
Yeah.
And it made me think about like I don't know if people today, in and out of the church, have tools to like lament well.
Yeah.
And
we're about to head into Lent.
Yeah, we are.
Which is really helpful.
That is, yeah.
Or it could be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To give us a landing spot. One of the other things that was written is pandemic grief is something different. In other words, the point that they're making is we don't have a therapy designed for this yet in secular thinking.
No.
In fact, she writes, I just don't think the help exists.
Yeah.
And I wrote here in the margins, yes, it does.
Yeah, it does.
The help does exist for the Christian, because all grief for the Christian, we know, finds its root and anchoring in loss.
Yeah.
And what the gospel kind of helps us do is to kind of be reminded that this loss cannot, in a kingdom economy, last forever, even if it were to last forever here, which perish the thought.
Right. Yeah.
But that ultimately in the gospel, no loss is permanent.
Yep. Yeah.
And when it comes to making conscious decisions about life, that not recklessly, but we can do some things confidently, knowing, that we do so in light of eternity.
Right. Yeah. I love Psalm 13, which borrows this. Well, no, the Psalm doesn't borrow it, but it says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me?" It goes on, but then it ends here. "I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me." One of my favorite things about the gospel is that it helps us look at what we do have, not just what we lost.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
I think my favorite part of this whole article, the one from New York Magazine, is this. Cormier says there are positive things we can grasp. Grief brings sorrow, but it also brings gifts. We can find out something about our inner sense of strength that we didn't know we had, or gain resources we didn't know we had access to. As we look at what we've lost, at the same time, we can try to identify, are there things that we have actually gained? Are there ways in which we have actually grown? This is a secular magazine ending their article this way, okay?
Yeah.
And that answer, Cormier points out, is different for everyone, because grief is a spectrum, and so is hope. And I wrote here in the margins, only when that hope is subjective, a la Hebrews 11, faith is the conviction of and the assurance of what we hope for.
That's right.
So if your hope is in Christ, well, then hope isn't a spectrum.
Right.
It doesn't have why are they more hopeful than me?
Sure. Yeah. The object is not a spectrum.
That's right.
Yeah.
The experience of that is that I understand.
Yeah. But yes, the hope itself is unshakable.
And I think we have learned some things from this season. I think I have me personally, like I think I've said this 100 times in the last 3 months. Like, I've learned how much I love my people. I've learned how much I need others.
Yeah.
Prior to COVID-19, I wasn't too sold on that. I was sold on that idea as a biblical principle,
right?
But I wasn't sold totally on biblical application for myself.
You were sold as a pastor.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I'm right there with you, man. It was my fuse and your fuse was pretty long compared to other people, but eventually it runs out. This way, yeah. And how much of our own sorrow and pain is mitigated just by being around people that we care about, you know, in the church.
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well,
that's enough.
You want to talk about something else?
Yeah, let's please talk about something happier.
Well, I don't know about.
Maybe not happy.
I'm not. Yeah, happy is a yuppie word.
Not as.
John Foreman was right. Super Bowl just happened.
It did.
Yay sports.
Yay sports ball.
Yay. So you don't really follow football as a general practice, but like, or do you?
So,
you personally?
I do. I'm part of, with my in-laws, I'm part of a fantasy pool that we do, and it's not like stat based. It's just like you pick who's going to win that week, and that's it. And so I follow it for that reason only, and that's about it.
But you gravitate more to basketball, right?
Yes,
Is that right?
definitely.
Like, I gravitate more to baseball.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't.
So you and I are on equal footing here with football, probably.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. If it's on, I like watching it.
Yeah.
Or I could do something else. I'm pretty indifferent about it.
Well, apparently this Super Bowl, which did you watch it?
I did watch it. Yes.
You did watch it.
In between keeping my son from running into things in his little stroller thing. But yes, I did try to watch it. Yeah.
Yeah. I unlike most people, watch it for the game, not for the commercials or the weird weekend halftime show, which creeped me out more than it did anything else.
Yeah.
But what was I'm like, dude, you spent $7 million of your own money to do that, dude. That could have gone to a lot better things.
Yeah. I always feel like those would be better in person too. They just don't. I don't know. It's
That was weird.
It's never as exciting as it's advertised to be.
I was also like, oh my gosh, there's fans in the stands. I was like, wow.
Well, it is in Florida, so
it was in Florida. Florida, land of promise and opportunity. I'm just kidding. Let's see. Well, what was on full display was the question of GOATdom of Tom Brady.
Indeed.
Now, I'll confess. So back in the day, so I would say early 2000s, I watched more football than baseball. Was living in Florida at the time.
Yeah.
Baseball's not really a thing there. Football is king. And where I grew up in LA, I grew up as a Raiders fan.
Yeah.
And so I was a huge Raiders fan. And as a Raiders fan, there's this infamous game between the Patriots and the Raiders that was dubbed the Snow Bowl. It was actually one of the first times Tom Brady, it might have been the first time, the previous quarterback, a guy by the name of Drew something.
Bledsoe?
Yeah, Bledsoe gets hurt. Tom Brady steps in, never gives the ball back for the next 20 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was the end.
And I just got sick of losing to Tom Brady.
Yeah.
I just got sick of it. I got sick of every Super Bowl being the Patriots. I got sick of Tom Brady always being the guy that beat me.
Yep.
I just got sick of it all.
Yeah.
Now, here's the weird thing. Something changed in my house in the last 3 years. And coincidentally, it's 3 years now. Tom Brady's been 40. And so Tom Brady turns 40, and all of a sudden I'm like, you can do it, Tom. And I'm like, oh my gosh. All of a sudden I'm rooting for this guy that I hated.
Yep.
And it's because there's something in me that likes to see greatness happen.
100%.
And so now it's not so much I'm rooting for him to the same guy to keep winning. It's like, because the argument is like, hasn't he won enough? No, now I want to see greatness.
Yeah.
I'm captivated by greatness. And everyone was captivated by that question.
Totally.
This Super Bowl.
Yeah. That was the big question. That was what's going to happen here. And it was super compelling because it was his first year on the new team.
Yeah.
And the question going into the season, which was answered pretty much halfway through the season, was it Belichick, the New England coach, or was it Brady?
Oh, we have our answer now.
And
you go to a losing team and take him that 1 year to win the Super Bowl. Tom Brady's the GOAT.
Yeah, no, for sure. So the GOAT question, I personally have wrestled with over the years because I was, contrary to you, I was born and baptized into a 49ers family.
Gosh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, well,
what a terrible legacy.
Sorry. Yeah, well. Two of my first words were "Go Joe."
Oh gosh,
Joe Montana.
I don't actually know any of this.
Yeah.
I'm hearing it for the first time, and I want to walk off stage.
It's fresh content. Yeah,
it's okay. Go ahead.
So, it's part of my DNA that Joe Montana was the greatest quarterback of all time. And for a while, I was holding on to that, and I would defend him in arguments. I would, look at the legacy.
So what about now?
And I can't remember which Super Bowl it happened. I think it was when he had won 6, so maybe the last one.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I don't like it, but you have to. There's something about greatness, especially in sports, I think.
Did you see the article where Jerry Rice was like, okay, he's the GOAT?
Yeah.
And if Jerry Rice says that Tom Brady is the GOAT, who played with Montana.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like indisputable now.
No, it's I mean, it's at some point, like, as I was thinking of what to say with this, is exactly what you said. At some point, you just like to watch greatness and like just watch it continue to go in an upward trajectory. And he's not going to retire, it sounds like. He's going to come back.
He's 100% coming back next year. 100%.
So it's like, all right, I guess I want Tampa Bay to win again next year. I just want to see him. One for each finger, right?
Yeah, I know. I know. And like, I'm of the perfect age to grow up watching Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And like, so here's the question, Andrew Clark.
Oh man.
Jordan or James?
Oh, that's easy, Jordan.
Thank you. Oh man, I really would have hurt you if you'd have
said
LeBron.
No respect to LeBron James. I even think there's an argument that it goes Jordan, Kobe, James. That's a whole other podcast.
That is maybe we'll just dedicate it to that.
Yeah, really. But no disrespect to him, he's phenomenal. One of the best to ever play. But Jordan is. If anyone watched the Last Dance documentary and doesn't think he's the greatest of all time, then I don't know what they were watching.
I just remember seeing those things like firsthand, and not being really that much of a basketball fan. Everyone was a Jordan fan,
right?
Everyone watched Jordan in his prime and was like at all times with their mouth hanging open.
Yep.
And that's not what it's like to watch LeBron play. It's not to say that he isn't amazing.
No.
It's simply to say that there was this universal exhale when we watched Jordan play that is not present with LeBron.
Well, and just this, someone's great when there's just this confidence that like they're going to hit the shot or they're going to like, I got to say, before the Super Bowl even started, I'm like, there's no way that Tom Brady's losing this game.
And even though Vegas was betting against him, everyone, because KC is the new emerging team.
That's right.
They started calling Mahomes the baby goat. And I'm like, baby, he's barely hit puberty. How are we calling this? We can't even be using that word yet. Anyways.
You got to be careful. Peyton's going to shut down the podcast.
Oh, that's right. I forget he's controlling everything back there right now. But I think even Peyton would be like, okay, it's ridiculous for us to start using the word goat around Mahomes until he's cut his teeth a little longer. He could get hurt next season.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, GOAT and by the way, which stands for greatest of all time for people. I don't know.
Are you saying that for never mind.
I'm saying it for My dad.
For your dad. Yeah, you took the joke for me. So.
And others who don't know what that means. Like, why are we talking about farm animals here? No,
yeah, and I thought the same thing. I was like, "There's no way he's going to lose this. There's just no way."
No. And that title's thrown around so flippantly now too.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, so and so is the GOAT, and it's like, no. Yeah. But it's like when Jordan would like, or Kobe, like has the ball in his hands with like, and sometimes in a game you just feel it. It's like he's gonna hit it. There's like no doubt in my mind that he's gonna make this shot. Or I think it was when they went up, they had scored 2 touchdowns in this last game, and I'm like, that's it. That was like the first or second.
For me,
quarter.
it was there was 55 seconds left in the half, and Tom Brady runs the field and scores that touchdown just before halftime, and I was like, okay, that was him flexing.
That's the jugular there.
That was it.
For sure.
And now, arguably the MVP of that game was the defense for Tampa Bay.
They did great
side
too.
of the coin. But anyways,
Yep.
Why are we so consumed by these questions? Why do we care about greatness so much? Why do we love to see greatness? Why do we want to talk about greatness? Why was everyone asking the GOAT question? Why is this such a big deal to us to debate about ad nauseum who the greatest of all time is? Why do you think, anyways?
Man, I think that. So I think there's something about seeing other people excel at something that is just interesting to watch.
Yeah.
I think that it's captivating in terms of it gives us like hope for ourselves too, to see someone suffer and or go through adversity and then accomplish on the other side of that. I think like in Brady's case, there's like now it sounds ridiculous to say now, but if you go to the start of his career, it's a total underdog story. I mean, he was drafted like insanely low the year that he was drafted. Played backup for Bledsoe, and then has now become this, the greatest quarterback ever. And there's something about that rise, I think, that we're drawn to. We're drawn to, and then once someone reaches that pinnacle, and if they're able to maneuver that with a certain amount of humility and grace, which I think he has for the most part, it makes you like, okay, let's see what they can do. Like, let's see how high this goes. It's just that human like cry to like see people ascend, or just to see people ascend, to see humanity ascend. I guess I don't know.
I think, so in the Bible there's this book that I hold with reverence, the book of Hebrews. And the book of Hebrews, if you don't know anything about it, is one big preoccupation with greatness. It's here's humanity, but here's the true and better humanity. The best human being. Right. There's priests, but here's the true and better, the great priest, the best priest. And it's just literally using that rhythm throughout and cadence throughout the entirety of its book to kind of make a point. Like our preoccupation with seeing someone ascend, with seeing greatness, is another, once again, gospel issue in us.
100%.
We, number one, just our own ascension in the gospel, meaning that we are depraved and then we are ascended and seated with Christ. What an incredible promise that is. But then two, Christ himself as the true and better fulfillment of everything we see on earth's praxis is just a bedrock of our outcry as human beings.
100%. I forget the book, but that great worship book where he says that they were created as beings who are unceasingly outpouring.
Oh, Harold Best.
Yes.
Harold Best's book. It's unceasing worship.
Unceasing worship, yeah. And how that's why I think we love talking about these things, because it's like when you hear an album that you love or a song you love, and you see a movie, and you're looking for someone who's heard or seen what you've said.
Yeah.
And you need someone to express it with.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we love talking about greatness in sports or whatever, sector of culture you want to look at, because there's something in us that's noticing the greatness and wanting to like respond to it in a way. And so that's how we
like we see that even like when we're kids, like it's like you build a ramp and on your driveway, and you ride your bike over it and you make the jump, and then the first instinct after the elation is, I bet I can build that higher.
That's right.
Like how far, how much, how many, how far can I go with this?
Or if you're with your friends, did anyone see that?
Yeah.
Or you go and tell them that you did that.
Yeah.
And that's all worship.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's all what that is worship.
Yeah.
That desire for worship. And that's what everyone was doing. They were worshiping Tom Brady. It was misplaced. Not necessarily evil.
Yeah.
But definitely misplaced.
Yeah.
In terms of its, understanding the implications behind it.
Right. Yeah.
And so for me, every time I was listening to the commentators going like, is he the greatest of all time? Is he the greatest of all time? I kept saying, like, smirking to myself and saying in my head, well, no, he's not.
Yeah.
He's just getting us closer to what we're really asking.
Yeah.
And what we're really asking has to do with Jesus.
Yeah. Well, and those, the people in support of whoever is the greatest, whether it's music or sports, it's like, here's the list of the reasons why he's the greatest. And then the contrarians will say, here's the reasons why he's fallen short. He's achieved, but not over here.
Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah.
Except in this percentage point over here. Or perhaps, more moralistic people will come to the table and will say, he may be great at that, but is he a good husband?
Yeah.
Or a good father? Or
that's right. Morally, he might be good athletically, but is he good morally?
And it just goes to show that there's holes in all of the gods that we lift up that aren't the one and true.
Yeah, well, dude, I turned on the NFL Network the next day. Zach and I were watching it, my son, and like the question they were then asking is Tom Brady the GOAT of GOATs? And I'm like, are you kidding? They're literally borrowing King of Kings,
right?
Shepherd of shepherds. They're borrowing this language without even realizing that's our instinct.
And that's first of all, I hate that conversation. I hate who's the greatest athlete. It's like
you can't cross it.
No,
you can't. Tiger Woods, what he did, Michael Jordan cannot do what Tiger Woods did.
No,
and
vice versa.
And vice versa.
Yeah, no, it's like I even within the sport, like even pitting Jerry Rice against Tom Brady, it's like they don't play the same position.
They don't play the same position.
Yeah, that's totally different.
Have you ever seen Tom Brady try to scramble? It's like watching a big white guy.
That's
try
right,
to scramble.
exactly. Yeah,
he doesn't do it.
Yeah, it's like if I was out there.
That's why he doesn't play wide receiver.
Stumbling around. Yeah, so
he never scrambles.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like totally borrowing King of Kings, GOAT of GOATs, the greatest.
Yeah. Who's the great? Muhammad Ali, right? In boxing. Who's the great? I'm the greatest. Like, we just don't realize how much we're trying to connect into the gospel with every little thing that our affections are pouring out for. All of that affection, all of that pouring out about who the greatest is really asking the question about Jesus. It's really, really always about that. It really is.
Yeah. Well, and these athletes provide, or musicians or entertainers provide something for us.
Something for us to pour out to in hopes that they will pour it back into us.
Right.
And if you're wondering why it falls short most of the time,
that's right. Yeah.
It's because you're looking at the wrong goat.
The wrong goat.
Yeah. Yeah. I tried to.
Good job, man.
I tried so hard. How about we end there?
That sounds good. I think that's a great place to
I think
end.
that's a great place. We'll see you guys next week.
All right, take care.